Thank you. Thank you.
No worries. Hey, everybody. We're live on the Biscuit Box. It's 11. It's probably a little bit past 11. We're a tiny bit late. We were engrossed in conversation there because guess what? I'm a parent as well, and I'm really excited to talk to Trevor Higgins this morning. He's in with us. Trevor is a coach, and his website is cloudsaway.ie, and I'm going to put the website link in the comments below, so you can check him out. And Trevor specializes in parent coaching, but that's not all he does. He does a few other exciting things as well, which he can explain to you. But for today's session, we are primarily interested in the parenting coaching side of stuff, because it feels like everyone's talking about their kids this week. It's either, thank heck, they're going back to school, I'm so happy, or I don't want them to go back to school, I don't want the routine anymore. Whichever way you sit, the conversation is around children. And so today I thought, well, this is a good time to bring on a parenting coach. But Trevor's a little bit different, and I'm going to get him to explain this bit, because I know you're thinking, is this the kind of guy that we hear on the radio all the time, like on News Talk, like on the Moncrief show? You know, you ring in with an answer or a question, and then they bang home the answer on what you should do with your kids. But Trevor looks at this in a different way, and I'm excited because you know me, and you know our creative minds, we like to look at things in a different way and not do the cookie cutter things. So I'm interested in Trevor's brain, and I know you'll be interested in Trevor's brain this morning. And the line is open as well if you want to shoot questions. Trevor will be happy to ask. But today we're going to have a conversation around how to get creative with connecting to your kids around the dinner table. And Trevor's going to share his goals with us this morning. So first, Trevor, welcome to the Biscuit Box.
Thank you very much. How's it going?
Great. It's lovely to have you here. And there's a lot of people excited to hear what you have to say. But I'd love you to just clarify, first of all, what type of coach you are and how you work.
Okay. Well, my coaching primarily, I guess my specialty, it would be working with parents, and part of that came from this idea that my whole career over 20 years was working with children, young people, parents, families, that type of work, whether it be everything from special needs assistant to working in special schools to working with youth mental health to management. And I got into coaching because I found that I was eager to do direct work. And as I got further and further up into management, I was getting less and less direct work. And so I went back to school, and I studied. I went to the Irish Management Institute, and I got a qualification in coaching, and began my career that way. And so I kind of added my qualifications with psychology and my coaching and my experience, and I put those three things together, and that's where parent coaching became my specialty or my niche. And so I work with a lot of parents. I also work with young people directly as well. And I also work with parents in their homes. I also work with parents in a corporate setting. But I also do other types of work. You know, as I mentioned, working with young people, I'd also work with people around their careers. You know, sometimes it's work-life balance. Sometimes it's anxiety in the workplace. Sometimes it's and sometimes it's people who aren't parents, you know. So really, from my perspective, I'm a professional coach, and the fundamentals of coaching, from my perspective, are the same, irrespective of the subject matter. Now, with parent coaching, of course, I bring my stuff to the table in terms of qualifications and experience and stuff. But part of my mindset, and like what you were saying about what people might think of when they think of a parent coach or a parent expert or whatever that means. But part of my thinking originally is just that parents themselves, I see them as the experts on their children. So the fact that I have some experience with this, that, or the other, or that type of thing, what I find is the coaching conversation is the parent and myself on equal ground. So these are the two of us are together, and we're putting our heads together, working in partnership, working in collaboration to achieve whatever it is the parent wants. So that may be something very specific, or it may be sort of a sense of reassurance, or it may be a sense of things don't feel as good as they could, or it can be very. So sometimes having a sort of some part of my approach would be having an honest, open, confidential conversation, and each of us bringing what we have to the table. This idea the parent is the expert, and then I can facilitate a conversation to achieve what they want.
So that's cool. I think it's lovely to hear that, because so like everything that's put out there content wise, and this comes down to businesses as well, that it's like this one way fits all, when actually every business is different and every parent and every child is different. And so you have to adapt what the fundamental knowledge base is to the people that you're working with, because that, everybody is different. So it's lovely to hear that you're have that kind of attitude towards what you do. It's refreshing. So tell us some key things for connecting with the kiddies. I know a lot of people struggle with, how do you build that relationship? How do you, nurture that table? And when you sit down and knackered and even trying to get green vegetables into them. And I think some people, including me, are so focused on trying to get the nutrients in that you nearly forget about the conversation,
Yeah.
How would you tackle that one, Trevor?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that to some extent, when we're talking about meal times, I suppose we could assign look at a number of priorities there, and that's up to the parents themselves to decide for themselves, isn't it? But I guess where I would come from would be, to some extent, some of what we're talking about might depend on the age of the child, of course, everything from a toddler to a teenager. So we have to keep that in mind. But in general terms, what I would say is that and I'm conscious of the fact that not all parents have this opportunity. People have different working schedules and different lifestyles and everything like that. So it's not the one size fits all thing. But what I'd say is, like, I think that I think that we would all kind of agree that there could be some great benefit to the idea of a family gathering around the table for a meal. Okay, and there's nothing new about that. And so, of course, what is the purpose of the gathering together? Well, you could say it's to get nutrients. Okay, but there's also a social function there, isn't there? And there's a caregiving function there as well. And so, from my perspective, I think if parents are interested in sort of looking at facilitating an opportunity for open communication. So this idea of saying that, okay, what do I want? What am I interested in here as a parent? Well, I want my child to feel that they can come to me with anything, or I want to ensure that the lines of communication are open between myself and my child. I want to encourage encourage and model good communication. So this idea of so for example, around the dinner table, so we're all eating, we're having a thing, passing the stuff, whatever it might be, but then we're also saying, like, maybe we're sharing our news, and that can happen in a structured way, or it can happen in a sort of loosey-goosey way. Again, that's up to the parents and their own style and their own relationship with their children. What I can tell you about is how I do it. At home, what I do is we have two children, and what we typically do is we take turns sharing our news, and myself and my wife also share our news. So it's something, so the children listen to me telling them about my day or about my news or what's on my mind, and then I also listen to the children, and it's their turn. And so if one child is speaking, another child wants to join in. Oh no, it's still their turn. And to some extent, that's very structured. That might be unusual. That other parents might prefer, like, no, people can interject. So it's not so much of a rigid thing. But I guess the idea where I'm coming from is this idea of that we have a little routine, and having that routine can be useful. So this idea of saying trying one thing for a little while and it didn't go well and nobody ate anything, that's one thing. But this idea of saying that, well, it's important to us that our children eat, but it's also important to us that our children feel that they can talk to us openly at the dinner table, and then it also gives a message that we're interested and curious about you and your life. Mm-hmm. And so, without saying it explicitly, you're just by asking. So in terms of that, this idea of saying, okay, what's your news, and like, how was school today? Fine. Okay, fine. So then I say, oh, okay, and then maybe you start to tell about your day. Okay, not much happened. You're okay, and then you start to tell your thing, and then what can happen is, naturally, as opposed to it being like, okay, Johnny, you're on the spot. Tell us everything in this sort of thing. How was school today? Fine, boring, same, whatever. Instead of that, we can decide. It doesn't have to necessarily be about how was school today. It can be you can lead by example by telling about what was on your mind today, like how good your breakfast was, or how tired you are, or whatever it might be. and it's us talking to each other. And so and maybe doing that modeling after some time might bring that out of the children, where they might say like, my turn now.
And I love that, because I think that's the struggle. Because like 9 times out of 10, it's, I don't know, nothing. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm such a nosy Parker as well. I'm always looking for the news, like, and sometimes I feel like I talk to myself. So that's good. I must try that, Trevor. Well, I'm going to tell you my news of what I happened to me today. And so it's just the repetitiveness of that kind of conversation, even with yourself. So that's a great, I love that. Okay.
As well as asking them. So this idea of, so the questions you ask them don't necessarily have to be, how is school today? It can be as a parent, you would know your child's interests, and so perhaps your child is interested in, I don't know, Lego, and so then you can ask them, you can tell them, ask them a silly question about Lego, or about sort of a Lego set, like a superhero set or something, I don't know, some sort of thing where the child now is the expert, and they now are in a position to set the parents straight, or Johnny, how does that work? What was it? Which one is stronger, Batman or Superman? And then the child is telling them their opinion about that, and that can lead into other. So that kind of idea of question and answer, turn taking. My parents are curious about what I have. I have things to say that are important, and my parents are all ears to me, and eye contact and listening. And that's so valuable, because it's a little routine. You get the news, you get the chat, you get all that. But then you also it's also about the relationship, isn't it, going forward? Because parenting is a lifelong thing, and so then when they're teenagers, they might be, this routine of, or this feeling of, I can speak openly with my parents. My parents care about what's on my mind or what I had to say. That is in them then.
Because it's always that fear, especially when you have younger kids, going, oh, I hope this never ends. I hope I'll always be able to talk to her, or her to talk to me. And sometimes my daughter is 9, and I feel that the distancy stuff is starting to kick off, and it's like, oh, whatever, Mom. I'm going, oh shit, I'm so ready. And I'm like, oh, please, like, let all that work that I've done up to now down the Swanee, being like, or will that kind of play out then? And how? I guess I'm bracing myself for the teenage years, and I can feel it happening now. But I love that of zoning into their expertise or their interests rather than the information that you want initially. Tell me, are they being nice to you in school? What? Like, why would you? Why are, like, I worried about bullying and all this stuff. So it's not about you, it's about the child stuff to open up, right?
Yeah. I mean, the idea of saying that a parent's priorities in terms of this idea of information sharing, from a child would be much more in the moment perhaps, and they'd be more interested in, like, what's going on now, what's going on next, what are we going to do, as opposed to what I did this morning during my Irish class, you know what I mean? So to some extent there's this idea of there might be a thing around whether this idea of making it making the process compelling for the child, so therefore they're motivated to participate because it's fun, it's interesting, it's my turn now, it's special, it's all eyes on me, whatever it is, it's human nature stuff.
Tell us what's the best way to make really messy slime, like, oh my God, Mom, let me show you. Oh, shit. But that's great. And it's all those little kind of mindset hacks that will enable that connection, like what we're talking about around a table at dinner time. So that's one thing. Any other tip, Trevor, on that one?
Well, with the dinner table conversation, I mean, I guess to some extent, it depends on what you want to achieve out of it. I mean, like, you might have a sense where, like, okay, at the dinner table, it turns into all about compliance or discipline, or sit down, eat your green beans, or whatever it might be. And so then you might want to look at that, as parents, you might be like, God, dinners are unpleasant, or it turns into a chore, or it turns into telling them to do something, and then so it's all about that. So what can actually happen, I think, maybe with when the focus goes away from this power struggle between, eating your carrots or not eating your carrots, that the food is there, of course, and of course it's the main reason why we're gathered together to eat. But as I said before, I think there's also a big social element there. So if we're finding that the social element is really gone down, and all that's going on is this sort of power struggle about eating green beans, we might want to look at this, and even temporarily. I mean, not eating green beans for a week isn't going to cause a problem, really. So this idea of saying, like, well, what do I want as parents? What do I want? Well, I'd like the dinner to be less around power struggles and more around might make it more pleasurable. Let's make it more pleasurable. And how can it be more pleasurable? Well, maybe there's music in the background. Maybe we take turns talking about stuff that have nothing to do with school or work. Today we're going to talk about something that have to do with animals or something. It can be. There's so many ways to approach it, but really the parents will know best for their children. But ultimately, I think the first point would be the parents to decide what do they want. What do the parents want, as opposed to saying, like, okay, I better do that. I must do that. I should try to do that. Versus, what do they want? Well, dinners are fine. Thank you very much. Okay.
That's interesting, and it's definitely to even ask yourself, what kind of experience do I want for my kids around the table? Because that's an education in itself. And I'm married to a Frenchman, so it's a really, the dinner table is so important in the French culture. Everything happens around the dinner table, around food. And, it's really, that's the culture. And I see that when I just being engrossed now with that culture as well as the Irish culture, and it's a lovely thing. And it's, yes, you don't want it to be too structured or formal, which is kind of the French way. Like there's a big structure there. And I quite like integrating the two cultures, because it takes away that formality. The Irish way isn't as formal. So it's kind of a nice balance. But I want to just bring in a few comments from a few people that are in, Trevor.
Okay.
Deirdre Buckley Cairns, hey, Deirdre says, I used to do the dinner chats with my children pretty much up until they left for college, and it really created a culture of sharing what's happening in our lives. So now we're still really open and have great communication. Also allowed everyone to feel heard without judgment. That's great, and it's such a lovely thing, just from having older kids as well to that it does work, that's what happens, so that's brilliant. Thanks, Deirdre, for that. And Mary, hey Mary, how's it going? Mary says teenage years aren't as bad as you fear. Yay! They'll all talk when they're ready. Sometimes if it doesn't happen at the table, it will happen loading the dishwasher. That's a great point. And Neve says, are in the car. Yeah, because that's a real, you're in a capsule with people when you're in a car, and especially if you're commuting as well for different places, that happens. What do you think about that, about the non-verbal dinner table, and what do you say about that, Trevor?
What do I say about what? I couldn't hear the last part.
Sorry, the non-verbal dinner table, when there's not much happening at the dinner table.
Yeah, when people aren't talking, when there's not much talking, not chat, not much conversation going on.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't think there's any like dinner table rules, really, is there? I mean, so it's so much up to what the parents want. So I mean, I think that even like one of the people there commented about the teenage years, that kind of stuff. Even then, that thing around heard without judgment. So this idea that even then, though, when they're older and maybe they for whatever reason they don't want to, they're not in the mood to chit chat at the dinner table. The fact that the parents are still interested in what they have to say, that still comes across as, okay, I don't have anything to say, I don't really feel like talking, but anytime I do want to talk, they're there to listen.
Yeah.
And so I think that idea is so important for a sort of a more of a teenager, young person type of thing, that they always know that they have a trusted adult that they can talk to should they choose to, and the idea of dinner table being quiet, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's okay too. In other words, maybe the family is less of less talkers, that kind of stuff. So it's not about filling the air with conversation, is it? I think it's more about how people feel.
Yeah.
And I think children feeling that they know that if they have something to say or there's something's on their mind, whether it's sort of a harmless, just a thought, or whether it's something that's bothering them, or whether it's something they're confused about or questions. This idea of a child, I mean, that's what parenting is. It's teaching a person how to be in the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, within that, there's education, there's physical needs, and all these things we know. But I mean, in general, I mean, that's what this idea of saying, well, that you don't have to figure it all out yourself. We're here to help you. We're here to support you, and it doesn't have to be like a daily thing of like, you must give your chat today or something like that. It doesn't have to be like that. It can just be a sense of openness, I suppose.
That's it, and that open communication, and then that brings in the conversation around smartphones and tablets at the table. Like, it's a big no-no in our house. Like, but I must say, when I go out for dinner, well, I have a 2-year-old, so it's quite different. But when I go out for dinner, you have the toys for a certain length of time, and then it's like, we've just got our meal. Okay, Peppa Pig on the phone for just give us half an hour,
Yeah.
I feel really guilty about that, and I feel, oh, feck it, am I bringing in that tablet, that phone thing? And we don't do it at home, but definitely when we do. What do you say about that? Would you say no way for tablets in any circumstance, or how do you feel about
that? No, I wouldn't say no way. I mean, I think that again, I would go back to what the parents want to achieve. So I achieve going out to dinner. Obviously, you want to have a good time and eat. But I guess what I'm talking about with achieve, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, perhaps this idea of saying, okay, we're going out to dinner now, and perhaps the parents want to have an opportunity to say, want to have a break from the children, or maybe they have something very important that they want to talk about, or maybe that maybe they're tired and enough is enough, or whatever. So I wouldn't, from that regard, I wouldn't come from a perspective of saying, okay, these are the rules. These are the rules of life. I mean, who am I to say that? So what I would say, however, is that again, I would ask the parents, what do they want from it? So this idea of like, well, tonight I would like just the children to be quiet, and for me and my partner to have a nice chat, or to enjoy the bottle of wine, or have the chicken, or whatever it is. And so this idea of saying that. So then what are we saying then? What I want to look at it would be, are we saying that this is something we want to do every time we go out to eat? So then are we saying that? So maybe the parents would say like, well, at home they don't have tablet or things, but when they go out for a meal, maybe they do, or maybe they do sometimes. So this idea of it doesn't necessarily have to be rigid. There can be exceptions to the rule. There can be like, screw it today, or whatever it might be. But then again, if you want to look at big picture, this idea of saying like, well, at some point, do we want to look at this idea of, well, what do we want for our children? Do we want our children to be able to go out and have a meal in public without a machine, without a computer, or do we want them to have to have the computer or the smartphone be a necessary part of that? This idea of like, sometimes when you say never, nothing, never, it can be the forbidden fruit, but then again, the other idea of saying that, this idea of something becoming the norm, so that there's an association, because children know no different, in the sense that like, oh, this is what we do when we go out for dinner. I get my phone, or you know what I mean. And so that's the norm. And so then when that changes, it's like, wait a minute, you're pulling the rug out from under me here. So that's why I would think about what the parents want for themselves in that occasion. So perhaps on that occasion, they're ready, they're happy to say, you know what, I'm done. You guys, we want our peace and quiet, or maybe there's special things going on with the children that we don't know about. So then I wouldn't put any judgment on that. I think it's very much in the parents. But what I would say in terms of advice would be to think about, well, what do the parents want? Maybe small picture, and what do they want big picture, and maybe try to align those two.
Interesting. Okay, and that's good. It feels nice not to have that. It depends on what you want from a parent, and it's okay to not want what everyone tells you what you should do as well. That have to work within your own life and in your own family. I think that's really important and empowering, that it's okay. You know, whoever's going to judge yourself. Like, you create your own system, I guess, with your family, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a question from Karen. Thanks, Karen. She said, "Would Trevor have any tips? I have a 12-year-old who doesn't have any friends." I know we're going off topic, but this is an important one, I guess, for Karen. He is a middle child, 2 sisters, 8 and 15. He's very sociable with older and younger kids, but struggles with his own age. He has been bullied as well, but at the moment he is not. Yay. He is very open to me and will tell me if something happens. That's brilliant. He does not want to join any clubs by himself. I know he wants to have friends, and it is very hard to see him like this. I'm sorry to hear that, Karen, but I'm sure Trevor would have something there to help you with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I guess what I'm hearing there, it broke up a little bit, but I think the main thing I heard was a parent talking about their child, a 12-year-old child who she doesn't feel has any friends.
Yeah.
Is that yeah?
Yeah. He doesn't have any friends, and he used to be bullied, but thankfully not anymore. And he's just was wondering, he doesn't want to join any clubs. He struggles with kids his own age, and he seems to get on better with either older or younger children.
Yeah.
Any advice on that?
Well, I guess ideally, myself and the person making the comment would have a conversation, about this and that kind of things. But just off the top of my head, what I would say would be that the first thing I would say is that the chronological age and developmental age aren't always synchronized. So, for example, my son also enjoys playing with children much younger than, not much, but years younger than him and stuff like that, or even younger cousins and stuff like that. And so again, I mean, this idea of that the ages have to be equivalent. I'm not sure if that's the case, because children, their chronological age and developmental age, they may not always be in sync, and that's okay. Obviously, if it's a big gap, that's a different thing. But what I would say in terms of friends, I mean, I wonder I would wonder where the little boy is coming from. In other words, I would wonder, like, this idea she was talking about, he doesn't want to join things, that kind of stuff. So what does he enjoy, and what does he like doing, and is there any way that we can incorporate another person in that activity? So as opposed to saying, so again, that's how I would kind of maybe begin, because what I'm hearing is what I would try to apply to that is maybe some problem solving, to say that, well, what is the problem? Well, my son doesn't have any friends. Okay, and what do we want? What do we? So what do we want? Well, we'd like him to have some friends now, and he has that experience with the bullying and stuff like that. So that maybe made an impact. And then there's the thing about the older children, the younger children, and that kind of stuff. And he might not be into the same stuff, or he may not be into the sports or the Fortnite or whatever it is there. And so to some extent, let's as opposed to sort of forcing or pushing the child to into things that they're not. That didn't come from them and aren't their idea. I would look at it from a problem-solving perspective and say, and check in with the child around what are they happy? Is this what they want? Do they want to be alone? No. Well, no. Sometimes they get lonely. Okay. Well, look, let's put our heads together and figure this out. What could we do? Well, are there any? She mentioned younger children and older children. So let's look at this. Some of those younger children and older children. Would they be people that the little boy would like to spend time with? Okay. Yeah, I like Johnny down the street. He's only 9. Okay, well, let's start there. And now what do we have? We have him with another boy. Does it matter that their birth certificates are the same age? You know what I mean? So they're together and they're playing and they're interacting, and maybe he's the leader and he's the one, and then his confidence can grow because he's looking at the younger ones looking up to him, and then he can feel better and like, well, that wasn't so bad. And so this idea of a gradual movement towards what we want, which is some friendships.
That's great, and I love that. Sir Ken Robinson talks about this a lot, about the educational system and how all the kids are put into classes by their birth certificate.
Oh, yeah.
and how that's not necessarily the right environment, because everyone learns at different levels and everyone matures at different times. And so that's interesting that has come up about, what's wrong with having older kids and younger kids to hang out with, even if it's just for that time until they get to the place they're meant to be able to deal with their own age group or their peers, That's interesting. I hope that helps, Karen. And thanks for sharing that. But it's a hard one. I think parenting has to be, and I've done lots of stuff in my life, it's the most wonderfully rewarding experience. Jeannie Mac, it's hard because you're questioning yourself so many times. Is this the right thing to do? How do we? Yeah. So that you're there. Like, how do you work? So sometimes I feel like, oh, if I was to ring Trevor up with this thing that's annoying me to work with you on something, like sometimes I feel like, is my problem big enough to work with a coach? Like, do you have to, can it be just regular, oh, they're not talking to me, help me please? Or does it have to be something more serious or something, to work with someone like you, Trevor?
Yeah. Oh, great question. I mean, from my perspective, really, what I would say is, like, if this idea that first I would look at it is like what harm could come from it. Is like, I can't see any downside. So this idea of saying like, well, we ran out of things to talk about or something, so this idea of it being small or big, I think what I would look at is this idea of if parents decide that they would like to make a change or improve something. And I know I'm speaking in general terms, but like, so this idea of like, this idea of a parent maybe, or you mentioned reassurance. So this idea of maybe what would be wrong, what's wrong with just a parent wanting to feel better? So feeling better may come from reassurance seeking, or this idea of having an honest conversation with a supportive expert, or it might be about something very specific and say like, we want to solve this, or I've tried all these things, nothing's working, and it's driving me nuts, or whatever it is, So I ultimately, what I would look at it is if there's something that that we'd like to improve, mm-hmm. then it might then it might be helpful to have somebody to work with around that improvement, so that it's this idea of saying, okay, well, let's set aside this time and this space to look at this topic. So as opposed to it being something in the back of your mind when you're stuck in traffic or whatever, this is something like, okay, this isn't going as well as I'd like, whatever it might be, and I want to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm taking action by engaging with myself, perhaps, and then this idea of saying, okay, and then that would be our focus then, to say like, okay, to get the lay of the land and to figure out what it is that to go from where we are to where we want to be.
That's great, in whatever context that's wrapped around for your own needs, right? Because everyone's needs are different, and wherever you are, if it impacts your day and your children and your home life, like that has such a huge impact on your work, your creative work, or your relationships, or yourself. Like it all has impact on each other, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really important to not be afraid to ask for help, and that's a big message in the Biscuit community. Don't try and always sort stuff out yourself. Like, ask people for help. There's lots of people that are happy to help, and that they're qualified to help, and that have experience, and can make your life so much easier, and thankfully we live in an age where we're accessible via the internet. It's amazing, that you can access all this knowledge and support. So yay for being alive now. So that's great, Trevor. Thanks so much. I think, the takeaways around today's conversation are, making it a routine nearly of how you communicate with having news time, which is such a lovely and simple way, isn't it, of just sitting around the table and having that shared space, and just putting a little label on it to, right, this is what we're going to do now, and whether they share or not is their choice, and not to push it, but as a parent to nearly guide that and just show that, well, I'm going to share my news even if you're not going to share your news, and just listen as well. And I love that you mentioned the eye contact thing. I think that's really important because it shows that you care and that you're interested. And I think even with adults, like, I love when people are chatting to me and you're looking into someone's eyes because you want to know what they're talking about and you're not looking over there. I think that's really important. It's such a simple thing. Yeah, and also another takeaway was that you have to go with what you want as a family, and it's what the parents what they want to achieve, with their kids as well, which is good to identify, isn't it? And just to know, well, what do I want? And it's the same in running a business, right? It's what do I want? And if you don't know what you want, it's very hard to make a plan towards it. So it's good to know that's a good kind of nearly mindset shift to look at parenting as well. Trevor, they're great tips, and thanks for helping Karen out there. And Karen, I hope that things improve with you and your little boy. And it's great that you guys communicate, which is always a good thing, isn't it? So, Trevor, how can people contact you if they are kind of wondering about getting some help? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing would be just to say that I'm very happy to have a chat with a parent before we decide on anything. So this idea of making this idea is not as if, once contact is made, now I'm locked in or something. This idea, I think the first thing would be to determine whether it's a good fit. Whether it's a matching, whether it's a good match in terms of the need or the want, and then what I can offer, that kind of stuff. So that would all be something that would happen anyway. But in terms of the means, I suppose mobile. I don't know. Do I give my mobile here? I don't know.
It's probably everything's on your website, is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the person can ring me, a person can text me, a person can email me. There's also a number of little, calls to action on the website where you can kind of just fill in a thing and then I'll get back to you. So every way under the sun. And then I work, as you mentioned, Tara, in terms of the internet, like I said. So I work with parents face to face, but I also work with parents over the phone. Yeah. I also work with parents, video like this, Skype and that kind of stuff. So there's lots of options that way too. So very flexible.
So that's great, because if you're not in Dublin, it doesn't matter. Yay! Yeah. I love the internet so much. It's just so Trevor, thank you so much for taking, I know your super busy schedule, but thank you for taking the time out this morning to talk to the Biscuit community and for sharing those tips. And I think it's just a nice thing to talk about, and to just to highlight how important being creative with your kids is, not even from a crafting perspective or art perspective, but just from a communication perspective as well. So thanks so much for highlighting that and for coming on this morning. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Trevor. Okay, gang, I'll see you next week at 11 o'clock on the Biscuit Box. Have a great week. Keep creative, and thanks for tuning in. Bye. Talk to you.